USC was back yesterday, and we're back today, baby. Welcome to Trojan Dash. I'm Sam Arslanian, your host, joined as always by Nathan Ackerman. Nathan, how are you doing after that win?
What a game. What a game. It was kind of a fun game. I mean, it wasn't a very exciting. I mean, as far as, contestedness goes, it wasn't a very exciting game, but it was a fun one for USC fans. That's for sure. And we will get into that, of course. I want to start this off, though, by addressing Jason Marks from Buffalo Dash. I'm sure you are on the stream right now. Thanks so much for tuning in. You are one of our most loyal viewers on this show. Your support is much appreciated. I'm going to ask you to hold off on the USC Colorado smack talk until our final segment of the show because this is a USC football show and we have a USC football game to talk about. And I just want to say, I don't really think about CU football a whole lot. Like, I think about it maybe once a day. Usually it's when I'm prompted by you. I feel like you spend, I don't know, 60% of your waking hours thinking about USC football. So, again, I appreciate how much you care about our team. But, again, I'm just going to have you hold off on all the smack talk, much of it baseless, I am sure, until the final 10 minutes of the show when I'm sure we can get into a little lively discussion. Thank you.
Nathan, you said it right there. That was a great game yesterday. They stepped on their throats for the first time in a while. I haven't seen USC put up a performance like that in one half, and we'll get to that later. But I want to talk about the highs first. We're going to get into the lows in the next segment. I always think it's good to look at what went well and what can be improved, and there are things to be improved from that game. You know, you put up 28 points in the first quarter. That is a fantastic thing. You look at the other, really, even the second quarter was pretty good. You look at the third and the fourth, though, USC still hasn't scored a touchdown in the third quarter in 2020. And that's just kind of weird. So we'll get to that later, but I want to start with my highs. Okay, I'm going to give you my two, and then I'll let you come in and tell me why your highs are better. The two highs is the ability to put up points. 4 touchdowns in the first quarter is awesome. Turnovers everywhere. The defense looks solid, but there's one player in particular, and he wasn't even playing the position he normally plays. He got in there a couple times, but Talanoa Hufanga. I have been speaking highly of him for a long time now. I took modern European history with him last year, so I really got to know him well there. We talked about the French Revolution and football, the two greatest things in the world right there. So he really showed out, and I think the linebackers have been one of the weak spots for USC this year. You see teams run all over USC, and a lot of that's from the linebackers. We're not putting pressure on quarterbacks as much as I think we need to. And you bring Talanoa in there, who had 5 solo tackles, 4 assisted, an interception, and a sack. And that interception was almost a pick 6. And it was a beautiful interception, the way he stuck with it, and then hurdled a dude. I don't think I've ever seen a defensive player make a hurdle that good. That was insane. And then just the ability to put up points. You got to step on teams' throats, especially when you can find a way to get ahead early. And USC needed to get ahead early this game. They have a short week. First time they're playing on Sunday in a long time. And then they got UCLA on Saturday this week, and hopefully the Pac-12 championship on Friday the following week. That's 3 games in 13 days. So they need to rest these guys up. Nathan, give me your highs.
Kedon Slovis was my biggest high from USC versus Washington State. Look, I would say that Kedon Slovis is back. I'm going to be honest. I don't think he ever really left, right? I've said this all season. If you take those first 2 games against Arizona State and Arizona and you call that bad quarterback play, then USC has a really good problem on its hand, and I would love to see some more bad quarterback play, please. And yesterday against Wazzu was, I think, honestly, maybe the best half we've seen him play ever. The first half against Arizona State last year when they put up, again, 28 points in the first quarter. He threw for like 296 yards in the first quarter alone, which is just absurd. But yesterday in the first half, Kedon was 17 of 18, and the one incompletion was his first throw of the game on a little drag route on a tough pass that wasn't caught, whatever. And then he closed the half with 17 straight completions. And he was making tough throws all over. 2 of the touchdowns to Amon-Ra St. Brown were just gorgeous passes, and obviously great plays by Amon-Ra to come down with those. And then the one touchdown that he floated to Tyler Vaughn's, the ball sailed 40 yards. It gave me kind of a nightmarish flashback to a throw they had earlier this year, I think against Arizona. It was pretty much the same play. Wasn't quite in the end zone, but Keaton made another perfect throw, and Vaughn's just like dropped it, which is uncharacteristic of him. So when the ball was in midair, I was kind of scared about that. But he caught it for USC's 5th touchdown of the half. That was awesome to see. And if this is the Keaton Slovis that we're going to get the rest of the year, the potential for USC's offense is just through the roof. And one of the guys that, of course, as I said, made that all come together for the Trojans was Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been good this year, but I don't quite think he's been as big of a factor in this offense as I think many of us expected. I think he's a guy that could go in, maybe the early second round, late second round of this draft. Has a chance to sneak into the first round. We'll see. But again, you kind of expected him to be like the focal point of this offense. And he's probably been the top target so far this year, but not quite as much as we expected. Seeing him go crazy in the first quarter, I think he tied like an NCAA record for touchdowns in a quarter, or set a Pac-12 record for touchdowns.
He tied the Pac-12 record of touchdowns in receiving touchdowns in a game in the first quarter.
And he did it in one quarter. He only had 65 yards on the night, but after the first quarter, none of it really mattered because they were up 28-0. He made some insane catches. That was really nice to see. And then a sort of non-tangible thing that I saw was this team's got the juice, man. I was at the game. I was in the press box, and you could hear the Trojan bench pretty much the entire game. They were chirping, they were shouting, they were hollering, they were having a party. My USC thing just fell behind me, whatever. They were having a party. That was fun. They were having so much fun. I think one moment that stood out to me was in like the third quarter at some point. Some like backup running back, I honestly forget who it was because it wasn't that significant of a play, and like the game was pretty much already over. He like kind of trucked this guy, but like not really. Like he probably gained an extra yard or two, and he didn't really blow the guy up. But the USC bench was like high stepping in place, like running around with their arms out, like everyone was going, oh, that was insane. It was a nice play, but it wasn't like that crazy. I don't know. But that's the kind of thing that I love to see out of this team. I think that there's an extra sort of energy around this group that, not wasn't there the first couple of weeks or wasn't there last year, but it was especially there last night. And that's the kind of thing I think this team needs. And I think that that's the kind of thing that this team feeds on. So that was awesome to see for me.
Well, I mean, you love to see that juice. You saw Elijah Griffin's pick. I know you pointed that out when we were talking about this earlier. That guy gets up and does his little dance as he always does. The juice is definitely there. And I think it was even there last year. That's something that, we've really started to see from USC. And especially when you don't have fans in the stand, you have to create your own energy. Kieran brought up a good point in the chat, saying tough to judge given a poor Wazzu defense, undoubtedly dominant performance by USC. I want to get to that. Just stay around for this segue into the lows. It's going to be beautiful. So just wait for that. But I want to talk a little bit about Keaton. We saw against that Utah team that he started to look a little bit more comfortable. He has some more time in the pocket. Keaton likes to sit in that pocket, and he can get out when he needs to. But when he's able to sit back there and really hone in on his throws, that ball comes out a lot better, and he drops dimes. That pass to Tyler Vaughns was a beautiful pass. It was right where it needed to be. Same with that Amon-Ra end zone fade. And I know you're not a fan of the end zone fade, but I am, especially with Michael Pittman.
I think, look, if you have the guys that can make those plays and a quarterback that can place it perfectly, I'm all for it.
Well, the thing about having Pittman was it was a guaranteed thing. If you were between the 5 and the 10 yard line, every time it was an end zone fade, right side Pittman, toe tap, perfect, beautiful. And we didn't see that a lot this year. And I think a lot of that's just because it doesn't really fit the receivers well. But you see guys like Drake London finding a bit of their own groove. That one pass where he got it like 10 yards out and then dropped around. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And we've seen Amon-Ra, start to find some holes there. But here's my issue with this game. And I'm going to segue into my lows here because there's a high to it and there's a low to it. The high from this is if a team ever so chooses to play man-on-man coverage with these receivers, they are getting torched.
It's done.
If you put any one of our receivers up against any DB in the Pac-12, they are going to torch them, right? You got 4 guys that are weapons out there. You can throw to any one of them. And if you're playing man-on-man coverage, one of them's going to get open. I said this earlier, and don't take this out of context, but Keaton reminds me a little bit of Joe Burrow in the way that he reads the field. If he's able to sit back there and be evasive, he is able to find that open guy, find that man-on-man coverage, and really throw it to the open guy. And that's why we saw Joe Burrow was so effective last year, is because everyone he threw to was open by 10 yards, right? And they were able to torch teams. Now, the bad thing in that, and the low from that game, is I don't know why a team is going to play man-on-man coverage with this. You got to drop that heavy zone and really hone in on it and figure out, hey, if we can put 3 guys in there, if we can put 3 guys, rushing and put pressure on Keaton and get him to escape and get him uncomfortable and maybe get a couple sacks there, then that game looks a little bit easier because you're forcing USC to run the ball. If I'm UCLA this week, I'm rushing as few guys as I possibly can. I am making them run that ball. That's what needs to happen. If you're a defense going up against USC right now, why would you try and protect against a run that is pretty much non-existent? I know they didn't run the ball a lot last game because they didn't really need to, but I wanted to see a little bit more. The other thing, and this is just something that I personally want to see. USC, for as long as I've been covering them, I have seen maybe 2 or 3 games where USC has been dominant in both halves. I know that's a tough thing to do. And I know that they wanted to save some players. They took a lot of guys out in the second half. They started running the ball a little bit more. They were really trying to drain clock and get that game over and get out of there, right? And that's a fine strategy. That's great. But as someone who watches this team, I want to see them play a full game where they step on their throats. I wanted 60 points yesterday because that shows, hey, we're going to be dominant for a full 60 minutes and you're going to have to stop us. We're not going to give up.
Yeah. The reason I say I'm not terribly worried about that is, like, by the time you got to the early third quarter, like, it was pretty much just backups. Like, I think the offensive line at some point was like Brett Nealon at center and then like 4 like freshmen who had really never started or really ever appeared in games at all this year. And then they were using like Quincy June-T in the running game, John T, whatever. I'm definitely botching that. But my point is, they weren't like what you saw in the first quarter is a different team than what you saw in the second half. And that's not just like because they were playing better. It's because it was like literally a different team. Like, they were throwing entirely different guys out there. So yeah, it would have been nice to see them get.
It doesn't concern me. It's something I want to see.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see. Like, I've never seen them get an Alabama type like 60-0 or like 50-7 type of win. And when it was 28-0 at the end of the first quarter, I was like, maybe that's going to be that type of game. No, I'm not comparing USC to Alabama. Please stop. But that's something that I wanted to see, although they would beat them in the playoff. Oh my God, I'm kidding about that too. That is something that I wanted to see, right? But again, I'm not terribly worried about that just because at that point, and then you had Keaton missing some time by like, he landed on his like funny bone, I think he said, and he missed most of the third quarter. Clay Helton put him back in the fourth quarter, which got some scrutiny, but I don't know. I didn't really have a big problem with that. You want to get his arm feeling right, and you don't want people to freak out about Keaton Slovis being out for the rest of the season because that would be an unmitigated disaster. So then you had Matt Fink in there, and I think he was like, Fink was 1 for 1, 100% completion, but it was for -5 yards. So that obviously was not a great stat line. But again, that's not the kind of thing that you actually are concerned about. And then, so the third quarter, you had basically an entire different team. And then the fourth quarter, you're just running the ball to try to get out of there and drain the clock. I wasn't expecting them to put up like 35 more points there. Although I would have liked them to see, and this is really in the first half too, kind of ties into one of my other lows, and it's the run game. We keep on coming back to it every single week. This week, I will say I wasn't as concerned with it. I think you and I are both kind of on the same wavelength here, where it's like our lows, yeah, they're lows, but they're not like concerns. They're just like things that in an ideal world you would have perfected, but like, I don't know, you can't really. But anyway, they rushed for like was it single digit yards? I don't know the exact number, but it was definitely no more than 5. It was 5 yards.
Count it on one hand.
You can count it on one hand. Yeah, so that was obviously not too great to see. But this is the kind of game where it's like, okay, if Keaton's playing like that, if Amon-Ra's playing like that, if London's playing like that, if Vons is playing like that, do you want me to keep going? Then I don't really care if they don't run the ball like 40, 50% of the time because, at the end of the day, if they can't stop your passing game, you're not going to let them stop your run game. I would have liked to see them go to that a little bit more in the second quarter and the second half once this game was pretty much over. So again, and then a lot of the rushing struggles came behind an all freshman, doesn't really play offensive line and like third string running backs, or I guess like fifth string because they have four guys that they go to on a somewhat regular basis. So again, that's one of those things that I think I would have liked to see.
I just want to see
them
more than
work on a
5.
little bit more. Yeah, more than 5 would have been great. Like, give me 7 or 8. But
You
the other thing is,
were a child when this happened. You were a freshman at USC in 2018. I went down to Austin, Texas, for the UT game, and I remember this quote. This quote has stuck with me. It is my favorite Clay Helton quote of all time. It was, "Anytime you look up at the scoreboard and you see you have negative 20 rushing yards, that's not very good."
No, it's not.
This just reminds me of that because like listen, it doesn't need to be huge. I don't need to see 100-yard performance from Stephen Carr, but I need more than 5.
Yeah. And then so again, this would have concerned me more if this was a game where like Keaton was more of the first couple weeks type of player that we saw, where it's like kind of inconsistent and you really need the balanced attack to scrape some points across. But that wasn't really what today was, because Keaton Slovis played one of the best halves of college football I've seen ever personally. But the other thing is the run game on the defensive side, it was fine. I mean, pretty much everything was working on the defensive side, but Deion McIntosh ran for, I think, 65 yards, 10 carries, which is 6.5 yards per carry. And that in and of itself doesn't really concern me all too much. But when you have McIntosh running for 6 yards per carry, imagine what Demetric Felton or even Dorian Thompson-Robinson can do against you. So again, they were kind of doing the same kind of thing in the second half, where the defensive line too was pretty much like a bunch of backups. But that was just like one of those things where it's like, okay, they can probably clean that up, but if they don't, UCLA should be loads of fun. So that's another one of my lows, that it's not like I'm going to lose sleep over it, but it's one of those things that's like, might want to, clean
That's
that
why
up.
I like having Talanoa closer to the line. I think he's one of the better tacklers that USC has in the backfield. And I think having him up there is going to be helpful. And I think he's really going to be someone to watch next week. I don't know where they're going to put him, if they end up putting him, back at safety or whatever, but EA is entering the transfer portal, you told me today. So maybe they'll keep him there. I think it's a good plan. I like seeing Chase Williams out there a little bit more. He really kind of had a big impact. He got a fumble too, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah.
And that missed handoff. So that's what I want to see. There's not a lot of lows that are, there's nothing that's bad or very concerning out of that game. Just some stuff that's like, we're going to keep an eye on this, because if you play a UCLA that has a dual threat quarterback and a really, really good running back, you're going to have to watch out for them. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But now I think we should move into our favorite segment, at least your favorite segment, because it allows you to talk for 12 minutes about every possible scenario USC has. And that's, where does USC stand in the national picture? So the big thing to look at is USC's not making the CFP at this point. It is very impossible. ESPN still has them at a 12% chance. I don't want to hear it, but BYU lost this week. So I guess we were right about one thing. Yeah, I would advise you to keep your mouth shut too. That was a great game. I mean, dude, they scheduled that game on Thursday and they played on Saturday. That's insane. But that was a great game to watch. I mean, they almost ended up winning it there at the end. Beautiful tackle by Coastal, basically goal line. But where does USC stand in the national picture, and what do fans need to be happy about? At this point, we said it on the last show, USC fans need to be happy with a Pac-12 championship win, undefeated season. And I don't even know if you need to win the Fiesta Bowl to be really happy about it. I think you need to get killed like you did in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. But I think if you play an Indiana team that looks really good, and you put out a good game, and even if you win, that's great. Even if you lose by a touchdown, that's fine. What does this do for USC? Recruiting, national ranking going into next year. That is what fans should be concerned about. Clay Helton's going to keep his job after this year, no matter what happens, unless like they get blown out by UCLA and then blown out in the CFP, and then whatever bowl game they get to, blown out. He's coming back, and I know that points some fans, some USC fans who want nothing more than to see Clay Helton gone. But I think that's what you need to look forward to. I think USC can finish this season, especially after the bowl games, maybe at number 7 in the national rankings. I don't know what it is, but I think it definitely could be top 10 if you beat a team like Indiana. Absolutely, you finish undefeated 7-0 with a win over Indiana, so making you 8-0. And that looks huge going into next year, huge for recruiting. USC already has a great recruiting class. That's big.
Yeah. Can we just make the Fiesta Bowl like a makeshift Rose Bowl for the 2020 season? Because
that's what it is.
It's going to be the Pac-12 champion versus the Big Ten champion. That's not Ohio State, so not the Big Ten champion, but the next best team there. Obviously, the Rose Bowl is a playoff game, which, as you and I have discussed, is like the dumbest thing in the world. Jason, welcome back to the chat. You and whoever over at Buffalo Dash can go crazy right now. But I think what you were getting at is sort of the point of this all, and that's like the ceiling for this USC season was not that high when they were going to play 6 games, or when they were going to play 7 games, and then when one of those games got canceled, it was like you can kiss the playoff goodbye.
It was a big game too. It was Colorado, a team that I think if the Wazzu game or the Arizona game got canceled, it wouldn't have made that much of a difference.
Yeah, a team that hey, I would have loved to play Colorado. I'm going to make that very, very clear. I wish USC could play Colorado. I would be 100% in favor of pushing the Pac-12 championship game back 1 week, fitting in USC Colorado that extra week, but that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, we have to live with the results and accept the fact that the better team is going to represent the Pac-12 South in the Pac-12 championship game. But we don't need to talk about that right now. Sorry, I had to get my shots in somewhere. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing what this team can do against the Bruins, because I think that the Bruins are an up-and-coming team that, like USC, we've talked about this all season, should not take lightly, and I would not be shocked if they lose this game. If I was a betting man right now, which I'm not, but if I was, I would take USC by like within 1 possession. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if the Bruins win this game. Of course, I predicted USC would beat Wazzu 24-19, and that was not a 5-point game. But whatever, we don't need to talk about that right now. But yeah, so this is the part of the season where I think USC can really take that leap forward for next year. And as you said, if they can start the 2021 season ranked number 7, somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, Pac-12 plays a full schedule. I'm assuming things will be back to normal by then. I can only hope. I guess you never really know this day and age. But this is a team that, like, if it can take those leaps toward the end of this year, like, it can provide the foundation for a serious playoff contention next year. And I think that, this we don't have to chalk this up as a wasted season because of that, because, like, we're not going to make the playoff now. Like we said, the Fiesta Bowl is like a pretty big deal for this team. And I know you said, like, you don't have to win that game. I would love to win that game personally, especially against, like, Indiana, Northwestern, whoever that ends up being, probably Indiana, I think. Because they're going to play Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Probably going to lose that, yeah. So that's going to be awesome to see.
Northwestern will play Ohio State.
Oh, you're right.
But and then Indiana will have a better record,
higher ranking,
and the tiebreaker over Northwestern. Or no?
Yeah.
Sorry, they will.
Yeah. So I mean, this for me is like there's still a ton to play for right now. Like this season was never playoff or bust for me. To be totally honest, like I would have loved the playoff, of course, but again, as I said, it just wasn't going to happen when you're only playing 6 games.
Well, I think the other thing to look at is how many guys do you have that are ripe for the draft? Now, 2 guys are going for sure, right? Jay Tufele is not coming back. He wasn't even here for this season. He opted out. Elijah Vera Tucker is gone. He's probably a first-round pick. People have him at as high as 15. I think between that 15 and 30 range is perfect, right where Austin Jackson went. I think they're very comparable linemen. Yeah. But you look at guys like Hufanga, Greg Johnson, guys that have a shot at going to the NFL this year, but realistically could come back. Now, I think it's very interesting to see what Talanoa does, because let's say he really likes that linebacker position. Helton really likes him in that linebacker position. We'll come back, get some more linebacker film, and then he's going into the draft as a linebacker, right? And if you're going into the draft as a linebacker, they want to see as much tape as you can. And if you can put up a college football playoff tape, that does a lot more than a Pac-12 championship in a COVID year, right?
Yeah.
In a Fiesta Bowl in a COVID year. So I think it's a very compelling case for a lot of guys to come back for USC. And you have a lot of guys that realistically can return, guys that are definitely going to return. Brew McCoy, Drake London. Obviously, you're losing Vaughns, but if Amon-Ra comes back, you have that there. Kyle Ford gets some more action there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure exactly which running backs are going to stay and leave, but I know they're all around the right age to leave if they want to. I mean, very frankly, I don't think any of them have done anything to really boost their draft stock that high. And I think another year can only help them. But you look at this team, and there are a lot of guys that can come back, and this team could be very similar to what it is now next year. And another year of under Todd Orlando, another year of Graham Harrell. Hopefully, we figure out how to mix up the air raids so we don't just get destroyed by drop 8 every single time. But I think this team is realistically a contender going into next year. Yeah, and I don't think that's crazy to say. I've said a lot of crazy stuff on the show, and you've said 10 times crazier stuff than I have. But I think that is something that is very fair to say.
Yeah, I want to bring this from the national picture to the Pac-12 picture now, and drop a take that I don't think is really very, very crazy at this point. I think what we saw this weekend is that USC is the best team in the Pac-12. Cue the angry chats, please. But we saw Oregon lose to Cal. We saw Washington lose to Stanford. And then it becomes the battle of the undefeated teams. You have a USC team that has beaten Arizona State and Utah. And the Arizona wins, I guess, cancel each other out. Congratulations. You won by 11. We won by 4. You can hang your hat on that, I guess. But when you compare the strength of schedule for these teams, I know like there's some formula that you were talking about, like opponents wins, like Colorado's opponents have more wins than ours. Well, our opponents have had like pretty much every game canceled this year, and like half their games have been against us. So sorry for all those losses; those were courtesy of us. Thank you very much. But I think what we can move past at the end of this year is that like Oregon, okay, if USC plays Oregon, Washington in the Pac-12 championship game, like right now, USC is winning that game. I will tell you that right now. A lot can happen in the next couple weeks. I think Oregon is a better team than they've been playing the last 2 weeks. I don't really know how they've lost back-to-back games to Oregon State and Cal because neither of those are like great teams. Oregon State's fine. Cal's not good. And then Washington, I never really thought Washington was all that great. They hadn't really put together a complete football game yet. They narrowly evaded the Beavers. They lost to Stanford. They blew out Arizona, which, again, is like, congratulations, you beat Arizona. Arizona doesn't really count right now. But I think the Pac-12 gets a lot of heat, and thus USC gets a lot of heat for not winning the Pac-12 championship like every single year, which is fair. Like USC should win the Pac-12 championship every single year. But I think that if they can get that done this year,
at least be in it with Oregon.
At least be in it, yeah. And I think that if that's something that they can get done this year, it'll be a building block for this team. And again, we probably not the best thing for this program that we're in the place where winning the conference championship in like one of the worst conferences in football, not just in the Power Fives, but like there's some group of fives that are probably better than us right now. We're at the place where that's like a significant step, which isn't great, but it's where we are. And again, we weren't going to go much higher because the playoff was not going to happen. The Rose Bowl is not going to happen. Win the Pac-12, win the Fiesta Bowl, and I call that a successful season, especially.
I think that's a really successful season.
Yeah, especially if you do it by. Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we got to wrap things up. I'm going to give one last thought. I think Washington is going to win the game handily against Oregon. I don't think Oregon figures it out. I don't think Oregon is it this year. They had to reload a lot. They're a great team, but they aren't putting it together right now. And I think we're going to see a USC Washington game. You're also going to see that Colorado game on Friday night, so we're going to know if USC needs to even win on Saturday before going into it, which is always something nice to know. And I still hope that USC puts their starters out there and steps on their throat early like that game.
To Larry Scott, if you are watching this, push back the Pac-12 championship. Give the people what they want. USC, Colorado, we can settle this on the field.
Hey, Colorado still has to play Utah first, and I think that's going to be a fun game to watch too.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it for all we have here at Trojan Dash today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. As always, you can find us on the web at www dashsports.tv on social at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at Dash Sports TV. And we do columns now. Nathan publishes columns exclusively with Sports Pac 12. You can find them on the web at sportspac12.com or on Twitter at sportspac12. We're doing this thing. We'll be back to our regular time at 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time on Sundays. Next week we had to push it because of the game this week, but we'll be back next week with more content. So as always, follow us on Twitter, check us out on the web, and stay tuned for more content. I'm Sam Arslanian for Nathan Ackerman. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you after UCLA.